New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
1-0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger, go for deploy.
Everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good morning. It's Thursday, May 2nd. I'm NASA's Sandra Jones, and you're looking at a live view inside of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft as we await its relocation from one docking port on the International Space Station to another. Today's port relocation of Dragon will see it move from the International Docking Adapter 2, or IDA-2, on the forward port of Harmony to IDA-3 on the Zenith, or space-facing Harmony port. This relocation is taking place ahead of the historic crewed flight test of the Boeing Starliner vehicle to the International Space Station, with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams aboard. Starliner is slated to launch on Tuesday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. But before that launch, we do need to move Dragon to the Zenith port to allow Starliner to dock to the forward port. At this hour, the team in Mission Control Houston, being led by Flight Director Paul Kanya, and SpaceX are working through a slight decrease in SpaceX cabin pressure. This is potentially due to one of the valves that controls cabin humidity inside Dragon. At this time, we're around 50 minutes down from the expected timeline. However, we are not up against a time constraint this morning for this relocation, and the team is going to continue to work through things, and we will provide updates along the way on that status. So again, today Crew 8 will be making a short trip in Dragon during this relocation. Crew 8 consists of NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, Jeanette Epps, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin. Crew 8 is currently suited up and inside the Dragon Endeavour ahead of the undocking. We are now targeting that undocking command for around 7:30 a.m. Central, with physical separation at 7:35 a.m. Central. Following that, we are expecting redocking to occur on the Zenith port around 8:18 a.m. Central. And as always, it does take two to tango. Mission Control Houston is working very closely alongside SpaceX for this operation. So joining me today from SpaceX to discuss the operations a little further during this port relocation is Jesse Anderson. Hey, Jesse.
Thanks, Sandra, and good morning, everyone. I'm Jesse Anderson, a manufacturing engineering manager at SpaceX. This will be the fourth port relocation of a Dragon Crew spacecraft, following those of Crew 1, Crew 2, and Crew 6. At this point, the crew is suited. Both the Dragon and APAS hatches have been closed, and vestibule week checks are coming up here shortly. There are 4 seats configured right now inside of Dragon and are numbered 1, 2, 4 from right to left when you are looking at the seats. Matthew Dominic is in seat 2, or the commander seat, and Michael Barrett is beside him in seat 3, which we can see there on the screen. And that is the pilot seat for Dragon. Jeanette Epps is in seat 4, and Alexander Gurbankin is in seat 1. The joint NASA and SpaceX teams just completed, or are waiting to complete some further checks prior to undocking. Once Dragon pushes away from station, the full maneuver will last approximately 45 minutes. While Dragon is just moving parking spots, the crew and the vehicle have undergone all the same checkouts and preparations as if they were getting ready to return back to Earth. That way, in the unlikely event that we see an off-nominal scenario, the crew and the vehicle are prepared to deorbit and return home safely.
Thanks, Jesse. Great to have you with us this morning. So again, teams are continuing to work through the procedure to relocate Endeavour from the forward port of Harmony to the Zenith port. Inside the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson is prime for completing these operations from the space station side. One of those tasks will include closing the A-Pass hatch, which is the androgynous peripheral assembly system, and it's the hatch on the space station side. That hatch is still open as the team continues to troubleshoot through this valve decrease. However, we are expecting that A-Pass hatch to be closed here shortly. The hatch on the Dragon side is already closed. And so you are getting a view inside the Dragon Endeavour there. The astronaut you can see primarily on your screen is NASA astronaut Mike Barrett. He is the pilot for this mission. Crew 8 is currently suited up, and inside the Dragon, as you see, they will remain in their spacesuits throughout this operation. Again, we are about 50 minutes down from the timeline this morning as the team continues to troubleshoot. We're expecting the undocking command to occur at 7:30 a.m. Central, with physical separation, meaning when you can actually see Dragon back away from the International Space Station, to occur at 7:35 a.m. Central. In all, the relocation takes about 45 minutes, so we are targeting around 8:18 a.m. Central for that redocking. However, these times are fluid and we'll continue to provide updates as we hear them. Again, there is no time constraint this morning while the team continues to troubleshoot.
And as we can see inside of Dragon, the crew is looking at their displays. They will just be monitoring as we do this undocking and redocking procedure, as Dragon is a fully autonomous vehicle. And they are just waiting for comms and an update, again, as Sandra mentioned. But great to see the crew awake and ready to go for this procedure.
And preparations for today's relocation have been ongoing. Yesterday, SpaceX completed Dragon's pre-departure preps, which included checkouts of the Dragon Eye system and seat actuations, as well as checking out Dragon's docking system, ground communications, and TDRS, which is the tracking and data relay satellite, and ground station checkouts. So looking a little ahead for this morning's activities, we do expect that A-Pass hatch to be closed. Following that hatch closure, we'll complete suit leak checks just to ensure that everything is performing as expected with the spacesuits in case there were an issue in which the crew needed to utilize those. Following that, we will have that undocking occur, targeting 7:30 a.m. Central for that command. Once Dragon does undock this morning, we expect a series of events to occur. First, we'll see two umbilicals that connect power and data between the two spacecraft will detach, and then the 12 hooks holding Dragon in its place will retract. After the hooks have retracted, Dragon will fire its thrusters in 2 short bursts, which helps break the stiction between Dragon and the International Space Station's docking port, and this is the point at which we are going to see physical separation of Dragon from the space station, again targeting 7:35 a.m. for that. Dragon will then slowly back away from the International Space Station and activate its LiDAR. This will help Dragon throughout the redocking procedure this morning. Once it acquires a solid signal, the ground will command Dragon to hold at approximately 60 meters away from the International Space Station. And from there, if everything looks good, Dragon will begin to move from in front of the space station to above it.
Go ahead, Dragon.
We're looking for a status update.
Yep, we are just getting some words together now. I will have those for you in another minute or so.
Copy, specs. We imagine you have a couple of things you're looking at.
And with that call out, we did hear that the teams on the ground here in Mission Control Houston, as well as SpaceX, are comfortable and understand the issue and are going to continue to proceed to step through the procedures for today's port relocation of Crew 8 from the forward port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station to the Zenith port of the International Space Station.
We have checked the initial conditions against previous flight data and realized that there's a slightly different set of initial conditions than previous missions, which led us to think that the pressure drop was greater than it actually, was out of family high. But in a deeper dive into the data, it appears that the drop is actually in family, and what we saw was due to a slightly higher PPO2 in the vehicle at starting, which meant we didn't have O2 injections, which made us think we were losing pressure. So we have also checked against the dehumidifier acceptance testing for this vehicle and determined that the behavior of the banks is healthy. All of that gives us no concerns with any of the dehumidifier banks, but we are going to keep Bravo 2 isolated for the port relocation, and we'll do a deeper dive on that after the operation is complete. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, man, we really appreciate the deep dive level of detail you guys have gone to. Really appreciate it. We can tell you care. Thank you.
All right, Dragon SpaceX. With that, we are going to continue on with our nominal port relocation actions. First of those is suit leak checks, which we are ready to support when you are.
SpaceX Dragon copies. With that, we believe we're giving us a go in 1.1 for suit leak check.
Affirm, go for suit leak checks.
Second.
TC Houston on the Big Loop.
Go ahead on 2 for station.
And TC, we're ready for you to pick back up in step 5.3 and 2.103 to close the APAS hatch.
Right, putting 5.3 in work.
And so we did hear some conversation between the ground up to Crew 8 on board the Endeavour spacecraft that they are go to proceed with those suit leak checks and comm checks. NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson will continue to work to get the APAS hatch closed on the International Space Station side.
Yeah, Sandra, that was some great news that they had been looking into the data as they were preparing for this departure from the International Space Station, but confirming that there are no issues
And we
with
are
the
getting
cabin
a
pressure.
view back inside the International.
SpaceX Dragon, ready to pressurize in 2.2.
Copy, Matt. You have a go to initiate suit leak check.
Copy, go.
And so again, we are getting a view inside the International Space Station. That is NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. She's going to step through some procedures to get the APAS hatch closed. You see her getting that hatch closed there. Following hatch closure, she'll work to take some photos for the ground to analyze and just make sure everything is looking good ahead of our undocking of Crew 8 for today's port relocation.
And what you are all seeing on your screen is NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson working to close the APAS hatch. And a moment ago, we did see her have a tablet in front of her. She is following procedures and instructions as she works through this operation. Again, this is in preparation for the relocation of the Dragon spacecraft. Again, we did get confirmation that there are no issues with the Dragon spacecraft, and suit leak check operations are currently in WIP.
Houston, station on the Big Loop and Dragon crew. APAS hatch and APAS equalization valve are closed, ready for Dragon IDA vestibule depress.
Here's your copies.
And great confirmation from Tracy, APAS hatch.
Copy, Dragon. We see the same.
And we did hear confirmation that the APAS hatch is closed and depressurization of the vestibule is beginning. Again, the undocking command is expected for 7:40 a.m. Central Time.
We are in a brief expected handover between our satellites, but we'll regain views here shortly of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft with Crew 8 on board. At this time, vestibule depressurization is underway. The vestibule is the space between Dragon and the space station hatches that is exposed to the vacuum of space.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Control of cabin air temperature via 4.080 is now allowed. I would also like you to swap one of your suits to Dragon to ground and give me a comm check on that pathway.
Copies on the big loop.
And so we did just hear those words up to the crew discussing that following this they will have some communication checks with their spacesuits to ensure that the ground can communicate effectively with Crew 8 during the port relocation. At this point, the team is communicating on what is called the Big Loop. That is a tie-in between SpaceX, Mission Control Houston, as well as the Crew onboard Endeavour. The team communicates on the Big Loop during integrated operations.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is going to initiate vestibule depressurization shortly.
And we are continuing to get some views inside the International Space Station as NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson works through those procedures to close the APAS hatch. Back inside Dragon, depressurization continues, as well as those suit leak checks and communication checks. So the next milestone that we're looking ahead this morning towards is vestibule depress. Again, that's that area between the two hatches that was exposed to vacuum.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop with vestibule depress started. We are expecting an undock time of 12:40.
The big loop, copy 1240. Thank you.
As the team continues to step through those procedures ahead of the undocking and port relocation of Crew 8 this morning, we are now targeting a command to be sent for undocking at 7:40 a.m. Central, with physical separation occurring at about 7:45 a.m. Central Time this morning. And we are targeting a redock to the Zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station at 8:28 a.m. Central. And if you are just joining us this morning, we are covering live the port relocation of Crew 8 from the forward port of the Harmony module to the Zenith port of the International Space Station in preparation for the Boeing Starliner vehicle to arrive next week.
Right, and this will just be a very short procedure. Dragon will be moving from IDA 2, or the forward-facing Harmony port, to IDA 3 on the Zenith or space-facing side of the Harmony port. So it will be a very short trip, just about 45 minutes for the entire undocking procedure and redocking procedure.
This morning, the team in Mission Control Houston, as well as SpaceX, did work through a decrease in SpaceX cabin pressure, but the team now does understand that issue being due to one of the valves that controls cabin humidity inside Dragon. After looking into the decrease, SpaceX and Mission Control Houston are comfortable and are stepping through the next procedures ahead of undocking. At this time, we are around an hour down from the expected timeline, targeting the undocking command to be sent at 7:40 a.m. Central. We'll see physical separation at 7:45 a.m. Central, and expecting redocking to occur to that Zenith port at 8:28 a.m. Central.
Houston Station on the Big Loop, just checking in 7.4 that IMV is deactivated.
Yes, that's correct. IMV is deactivated.
Roger, thanks.
Currently, if you're just now joining us, we are looking at a live view inside of Dragon Endeavour, and we can see the commander, Matthew Dominic, in seat 2, as well as Michael Barrett in seat 3 in the pilot seat, as we prepare for the relocation of Dragon from IDA 2 to IDA 3. And as we were going through preparations, we were reviewing some data, noticing some data that may have been something to look into, but we did confirm that there are no issues with Dragon and everything is proceeding nominally with the Dragon spacecraft.
That's right, Jesse. And the APAS hatch, the Androgynous Peripheral Assembly System hatch inside the International Space Station, is now closed.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. I made a couple comm check attempts on Dragon to ground. Wanted to see if you were hearing those. I am not getting comm from you.
Sarah, we were waiting a little bit. We made a couple comm checks. We were going to wait till we get a ground check to try it again.
Okay, copy that.
And as you heard, the teams are working on some comm checks. This is to make sure that they do have communication between Dragon and ground during the redocking operations. Sounds like they're working through this procedure right now.
And this view inside the International Space Station of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. Again, she's working through those hatch closure procedures. The APAS hatch is closed. Following this, they will pressurize the vestibule. That's the area that will be exposed to vacuum following the undocking of Dragon. Dragon will be moving from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner vehicle arrival with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams. Starliner is slated to launch on Tuesday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. Central. But again, before that launch, we do need to move Dragon to the zenith port to allow Starliner to dock to that forward port. The team was working a issue earlier this morning with one of the valves that controls humidity in the cabin not behaving properly. However, that issue has since been better understood and resolved, and the team is now proceeding through the undocking procedures. We are targeting the undocking command to be sent at 7:40 a.m. Central. About 5 minutes later, we'll see the physical separation. It takes about 5 minutes for the umbilicals to retract and for the 12 hooks that hold Dragon to the International Space Station to retract.
And Dragon crew from station, note to forward patch and MPEV are closed. And I'll put the photos on SSE 19.
Here's the copies.
And so those words from NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson down to the ground, letting them know that hatch closure is complete.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. For the Dragon at ground comm, we think the routing is set up incorrectly on our side, so we're doing some troubleshooting there. I will initiate a comm check once we have it to the correct configuration.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had tried from our end as well, and we're just waiting for a handover to maybe try again, so that works. Thanks.
And as we just heard, we are working through some comms communication issues. It sounds like we are going to attempt to rewire on the ground side to make sure that these comms do work properly during this relocation procedure. And again, this is exactly why we do these checks, the suit leak checks, the comms checks. That is to make sure that we do have everything working properly during these procedures.
On your screen, you are seeing the pilot of Crew Dragon Endeavour, NASA astronaut Mike Barrett on your screen. To his right, you see the hand of the commander of Dragon, that is NASA astronaut Mike Barrett, Matthew Dominic rather. And on the far left of the screen there is Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin. And on the far right of the screen, out of view at this moment, is NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps. Crew 8 launched to the International Space Station on March 4th and undocked a day later on March 5th. They did dock to the Harmony Forward module, which they are still currently docked to, but they are going to be moving to the Zenith port of the International Space Station this morning. And there you see the crew on your screen. Again, Crew 8 is made up of Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin and NASA astronauts Mike Barrett, Matt Dominic, and Jeanette Epps.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, comm check.
Dragon, PLT comm check, Dragon to ground.
I have you loud and clear. We did confirm that it was a config issue on the ground side, so good comm checks on Dragon to ground.
Copy, Endeavour.
Great news there. We were able to resolve the configuration issue on the ground side for the comms checks and just got some good comms between Dragon to ground. Again, this is exactly why we do these comms checks. Again, to make sure that everything is functioning properly. We did have a configuration issue on the ground side and we're able to catch that during these comms checks, resolve it, and just got a good comms check right now.
As the team continues to step through those procedures ahead of undocking, we are now targeting a new undocking time of 7:50 a.m. Central for the undocking command to be sent. About 5 minutes later, we will see physical separation following the umbilicals retracting and the 12 hooks that lock Dragon to the International Space Station being retracted. So 7:55 a.m. for physical separation and undocking of Dragon. And we are targeting 7:38 a.m. Central for redocking to the zenith port of the International Space Station. 8:38 a.m. Central. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 statute miles over the northern coast of Australia. We are continuing to get good views inside Endeavour of the pilot, NASA astronaut Mike Barrett, as he works through those procedures on the screens. Today's undocking will be autonomous, however, the crew does have the capability to control Dragon if required. And those leak checks are continuing. We are expecting words on status here shortly. And if you are just joining us this morning, you are looking at a view inside the Crew 8 Dragon Endeavour. Today we are covering a port relocation of Endeavour from the
Dragon SpaceX for undock time update. Dragon, we're going to delay our undock time target to 1250, 1250 UTC. We've completed the initial depress and are currently performing the leak check.
The updated undock time is 1250.
Also copies 1250.
And TC Houston on a big loop, that means that the exercise and shutter close constraints are extended by an hour and 10 minutes, 70 minutes.
Roger that, thanks.
And so those words to the crew of Crew 8. The new target undocking time is 7:55 a.m. Central Time for physical separation, and we are targeting a redocking on the Zenith port at 8:38 a.m. Central Time for that redocking. You also heard words from the ground up to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson regarding some exercise constraints and shutter constraints. The crew on board the International Space Station does exercise for several hours a day to maintain their bone density and muscle health. However, during some of these more dynamic operations, they do put a pause on those exercises to prevent imparting loads on the International Space Station. Additionally, the shutters are closed during some of these more dynamic operations just as a precautionary measure. Thank you.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Port relocation is enabled.
Okay, copies.
And so to go back to those shutters a little bit, the two sets of shutters that will be closed during this operation are the cupola shutters. The cupola is the window to the world of the International Space Station and has several windows where the crew can look out, take imagery, and even do Earth observation experiments. And the lab shutters will also be closed. Of course, the lab is where the crew conducts that vital science and research investigations on board the International Space Station.
Station Houston on a big loop in preparation for undock. Perform step 1 of 1.602 Dragon port relocation monitoring. Undock sequence start time is 12:50 12:50.
Station copies, putting step 1 and 1 of 1.602.
And those words up to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who will be monitoring today's undocking and redocking as part of this port relocation. We are getting a view inside Mission Control Houston here. Today's team of Orbit 1 is being supported by NASA Flight Director Paul Kanya. And we are getting a view of Paul there, as well as the Capcom, or capsule communicator, Neil Nagata. He is the individual that is speaking to NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. As we await those Dragon vestibule leak checks to be complete, let's take a little look ahead about some of the events that we expect to see this morning. At 7:50 a.m. Central, the undocking command will be sent from the ground to Dragon. Following this, about 5 minutes later, at 7:55 a.m. Central, we will see physical separation. Once the umbilicals retract, those umbilicals do hold or provide power between the space station and Dragon, and then we will need to have the 12 hooks that hold Dragon into place retract before we do actually see that physical separation occur. After that, Dragon will fire its thrusters in 2 very short bursts to help break the stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and physical separation from the station will occur. Dragon will begin to slowly back away from the International Space Station, and then will hold at approximately 60 meters away from the space station. At that point, a check will occur, and if the ground teams believe everything is looking good, Dragon will begin to move in front of the International Space Station to above it. And that is the relocation maneuver, or you might hear it called transition maneuver, on the loops this morning. We expect this maneuver to take about 25 minutes, and then Dragon will arrive to the zenith port of the International Space Station. But before it does dock, there will be a check-in halfway at what you call the midpoint. At this point, again, it will stop and hold about 60 meters above the Node 2 zenith port before preparing for final approach. Once we reach that area, flight controllers and Hawthorne will...
Station Dragon undock and departure review complete, and ISS crew is ready for departure.
Houston copies.
And good words there. The crew aboard the International Space Station ready for Crew 8 port relocation this morning. So again, once we are in that 60-meter hold above the Node 2 zenith port, the flight controllers in Hawthorne will once again command Dragon to begin its approach, flying until it reaches a waypoint. It reaches the waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is just 20 meters away from the space station, and once Dragon does reach that 20 meters, it will hold one final time for teams on the ground and the astronauts aboard Dragon to do a final check before docking. And if everything continues to go per our updated timeline, we are expecting that redocking to occur at 8:38 a.m. Central Time this morning. Following docking, Dragon's soft capture system will retract to bring the Dragon spacecraft in closer for hard capture, and that's accomplished by deploying 12 hooks to firmly hold Dragon in place. And in all, that procedure takes about 15 minutes. Following docking this morning, flight controllers will then configure Dragon for docked operations and connect power and data to the spacecraft once more. And the crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits, set them up to dry, and then begin operations to get the hatches back open, which includes pressurizing the vestibule and a new round of leak checks.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching the port relocation of the Crew 8 Dragon Endeavour with the Crew 8 members on board. Today is their 57th day on station for this crew, who lifted off from Kennedy Space Center on March 4th at 9:53 p.m. Eastern Time. They arrived at station about 24 hours later. So far, the crew members during this mission have dedicated hundreds of hours to scientific research in the orbiting laboratory. This mission is the 8th certified crew mission for NASA and SpaceX, which is a part of the agency's commercial crew program. And it's been almost 4 years since Demo 2, but since then, SpaceX has been regularly flying crew missions for NASA to and from the International Space Station at an average cadence of about one flight every 6 months since Crew 1. Crew 8 marks SpaceX's 9th human space flight for NASA, which includes Demo 2. Altogether, SpaceX's 4 Dragon Crew spacecrafts have completed 7 human spaceflight missions on behalf of NASA and visited the station about 40 times, which includes Crew 8's arrival to the space station under the NASA Commercial Resupply Services and Commercial Crew programs. Again, currently we are performing preparation for undocking from the International Space Station from the IDA-2 and will transition Dragon to IDA-3, the Zenith port, and relocate the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft, which will take about 45 minutes from the start of docking to redocking.
And if you are just joining us this morning, you're looking at a live view inside the Dragon Endeavour vehicle of NASA astronaut and pilot of Dragon, Mike Barrett. We are covering a port relocation this morning of Dragon from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony of the International Space Station. This is in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner vehicle launch. That launch will carry NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams to the International Space Station as part of a test flight slated to launch on Tuesday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. Monday, May 6th, rather. This morning, the team in Mission Control Houston is being led by Flight Director Paul Kanya. Again, this morning, SpaceX and the team here in Mission Control Houston did work through a decrease in Dragon cabin pressure due to one of the valves that controls humidity inside Dragon. The team took some time to look into it and have determined relocation can continue. We are now targeting a new undocking time of 7:55 a.m. Central for physical separation and targeting a redocking to the zenith port of Harmony at 8:38 a.m. Central Time this morning. And here in Mission Control Houston, the flight director Paul Kanya is now polling the team for a go, no-go to proceed with port relocation this morning. And as we continue to march towards an undocking at 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning, we are getting a view of the Dragon currently docked to the forward port of the International Space Station. Again, today's docking will bring Dragon from that forward port up and above the International Space Station to the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module. Here on your screen, you can see that Dragon is, of course, still docked to the forward port. You can see the nose cone is open. That nose cone does open shortly after launch and remains open all the way through the docked period of time. It does close once we do undock for a return home as we approach the entry interface portion of the flight. Also attached to Dragon is the trunk and the solar arrays. That also remains attached to Dragon during the docked portion.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Leak checks have passed. We are proceeding with residual depressurization and final configure for undock.
Dragon copies.
And we did just hear that those leak checks are complete and successful. Everything looking good from that perspective. Earlier this morning, the mission control team in Houston, as well as SpaceX, did work through a decrease in Dragon cabin pressure. The team took some time to perform data analysis and have determined the valve is healthy and have better understood the readings on that pressure drop that occurred. That valve now functioning nominally, and we are proceeding toward an undocking and relocation, targeting 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning for physical separation and undocking of Dragon, and 8:38 a.m. Central for the redocking of Dragon to the zenith port of the International Space Station's Harmony module.
If you're just joining us, what you're seeing on your screen is a view of the mission control in Hawthorne at SpaceX. We are just awaiting the procedures for undocking of Dragon Endeavour to begin to push away from the International Space Station and reorient itself to redock to the Zenith port, or IDA 3. This process will take about 45 minutes from the start of the undocking maneuver. And Dragon is fully autonomous. It's a fully autonomous vehicle, so it will autonomously perform this relocation today with the crew monitoring Dragon. In the case of any emergency, the crew can take over the Dragon spacecraft, but in nominal operations, Dragon is autonomous and can perform all of these procedures on its own. And again, we are expecting undocking to begin at 7:55 a.m. Central Time with an expected redocking at 8:28 a.m. Central Time. Excuse me, 8:38 a.m. Central Time for redocking expectation.
And we are a little less than 3 minutes away from that undocking command to be sent to Dragon. Again, it does take about 5 minutes for Dragon to actually physically separate from the International Space Station. Those umbilicals that are attached to Dragon and Space Station and provide that power will be retracted, as well as the 12 hooks that hold Dragon in place will also be retracted, enabling those 2 short firings to occur to break that stiction from Dragon and the International Space Station, and then at that point we will see physical separation. Targeting 7:55 a.m. Central Time this morning for that physical separation, and 7:50 a.m. for the undocking command to be sent from the ground to Dragon.
Six Dragon, a big loop, visors closed for undocking.
Dragon, you were garbled there, and just for awareness, will be about 12:51 for our undock time.
Six Dragon copies. We are visors closed for undock.
Copy, visors closed.
And you did hear that call there. Now targeting 7:51 a.m. Central for the undocking command to be sent. The crew also did let us know that their visors are...
Houston on a big loop. Dragon is transmitting video. Please confirm video and data are updating in the Dragon docking monitor.
I can confirm video and data on the Dragon docking monitor.
Roger.
And we did hear that call out about the visors being closed. The crew will keep their visors closed during this more dynamic phase of the mission as they do undock from the forward port of Harmony to the and redock to the zenith port of Harmony. We're expecting that undocking command to be sent in about a minute.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Final reconfigurations for undock are complete and nominal. As we previously briefed, dehumidifier Bravo 2 remains disallowed, and we have no concerns for the op there. So we are ready to repark Dragon ahead of Sonny and Butch arriving on Starliner next week. We will be sending the undock command here in a few moments.
Copies.
Station Houston on a big loop. Perform steps 2 through the end in 1.602 Dragon port relocation monitoring.
ISS crew is ready for Dragon undocking. We'll go 2 through the end of 1.602. Let's make way for CFT.
Undock sequence commanded.
And the command was sent to undock Dragon from the forward port of the International Space Station to the zenith port. The umbilicals are now retracting. It will take about 5 minutes before we do see physical separation. That is to allow those 12 hooks that are attaching Dragon to the space station to retract. And those umbilicals now demated.
Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
The first set of hooks is now opening. Again, there's 12 hooks in all, but there's 2 sets of 6. So those first 6 hooks are now underway of opening. Everything looking good for hook opening so far. And we are in a brief handover between our satellites, but we are expecting to get imagery in time to actually see Dragon undock this morning. That first set of hooks is continuing to open up, everything looking good on that end. And if you're just joining us this morning, we are in the process of undocking of a port relocation of the Crew 8 Dragon Endeavour from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner arrival next week. The first set of hooks is opening to release Dragon from the International Space Station. Once this first set is open, the next set of 6 will open up. And the first set of hooks is now open.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
Second.
Once the second set of 6 hooks open, 2 very short firings will occur to break the stiction between Dragon and the space station, and it's at that point which we will actually see the physical separation of Dragon occur. Second set of hooks continues to open as planned. Everything continuing to go smoothly in the second set of hooks opening. Second set of hooks open.
All hooks open and nominal.
Good.
And Dragon has undocked from the International Space Station at 7:57 a.m. east of the Bahamas. And that first burn has been completed and nominal.
Houston Station, Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Houston copies.
And those words of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson on board Space Station, letting us know she does actually see physical separation herself. We are still in that handover between our satellites, but once we regain communications, we'll see views.
Relocate zero burn is complete.
And all of the undocking burns were successful. And as Dragon continues to back away from the International Space Station, it's working to acquire its LiDAR tracking, which will be used by Dragon to autonomously execute the relocation maneuver.
Houston Station, ISS thrusters enabled per block Charlie.
Houston copies.
And so we are expecting a hold at 60 meters away from the International Space Station. If Dragon does go past that 60-meter mark, it can approach back to the 60-meter mark distance before the relocation maneuver.
Dragon SpaceX. Dragon Eyes have reacquired. Ground will be commanding a hold here shortly.
Dragon copies.
And we did hear that call out that the hold is now going to begin here shortly. Again, this hold is occurring at the 60-meter mark. And if you're just joining us this morning, the Crew Dragon Endeavour undocked from the International Space Station as part of a port relocation at 7:57 a.m. Central Time while flying east over the Bahamas. Dragon undocked from the forward port of Harmony and will relocate to the zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station in anticipation of the Boeing Starliner crew arrival. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are slated to launch on Starliner on Monday.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Ground has confirmed good relative navigation performance, and we will be commanding a go to relocate shortly. You have a go to raise your visors.
Dragon copies.
And everything continuing to proceed as expected this morning. The crew did get the go to put their visors up now that they are past some of the more dynamic phases of the undocking. And Dragon is go for that translational maneuver to help move it up in front of the International Space Station ahead of its docking to the zenith port or space-facing port of the space station. Everything continuing to go smoothly this morning following the undocking of Dragon Endeavour from the space station at 7:57 a.m. Central. Dragon is making its way to the zenith port of the International Space Station, but before it does get there, there will be a midpoint hold. This will allow the team to check out and make sure everything is looking good for the trajectory ahead of redocking. Excuse me.
If you're just now joining us, you are tuned in to the relocation of the Dragon Endeavour with the Crew 8 crew on board Dragon. That is just in case of any off-nominal situations that may happen. The crew is prepared to return back to Earth if necessary, but so far, as Sandra has been mentioning, everything is proceeding as nominal. We are in the process of translating Dragon, and in the undocking and relocation maneuvering, as Dragon is being moved from the forward-facing port on the Harmony module, the IDA-2, and moving towards the Zenith or space-facing port at IDA-3, and will be redocking to that location. Again, we are in process of that translation maneuver. As Sandra mentioned, there will be a hold through the maneuver, and these holds are there to make sure that we can check to make sure that everything is proceeding
Dragon
nominally.
SpaceX on the Bleak Loop. Ground will be commanding relocate transfer to begin axis transition. As a reminder, soft capture ring deploy will begin once you are in relocate to axis, which is after the midpoint.
Dragon copies. Thank you.
And as we do await Dragon to reach that midpoint hold, everything continuing to go smoothly. Undocking did occur this morning at 7:57 a.m. Central Time. Following that, the umbilicals retracted, the hooks open, and a series of short burns occurred to break the stiction between Dragon and the International Space Station. Dragon then did complete a hold at 60 meters and is now swinging around, heading to the zenith port of the International Space Station. And we are getting our first view of Dragon now following that undocking. Dragon is about 62 meters away from the International Space Station at this point. And an even better view there on your screen, you can really see the nose cone open, you can see the solar arrays. Again, undocking did occur at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. We are targeting redocking to the zenith port of the Harmony module to occur at 8:41 a.m. Central Time this morning.
Station Houston, Big Loop, monitor per step 6 now in 1.602.
Good work.
And some cool views there. You can see that Dragon is firing some of its thrusters as it is maneuvering its way to its new home location, the zenith port on the Harmony module. And a great view there again of Dragon with the Crew 8 members on board. And you can see that the nose cone is deployed through this relocation from port to port. We do not need to close that nose cone as we do use the Draco thrusters, the forward bulkhead thrusters on the vehicle to perform this maneuver. So we'll keep that nose cone open, but it's typically there to be able to protect the docking system and guidance navigation system when those thrusters are not in use.
And Dragon is now about 60 meters away from the International Space Station. And so we are now getting a view on our screen of what Dragon's LiDAR system is seeing. That is the International Space Station's forward port where it just undocked from. As you can see, Dragon is beginning to make its way more in front of the space station as it prepares to redock on top of the International Space Station to the Zenith port of Harmony. Dragon is now 62 meters away from the International Space Station. Everything continuing to go smoothly this morning. And if you are just joining us this morning, we are covering the undocking of the Crew 8 Endeavour spacecraft from the forward port of Harmony, which you do see on your screen there, which Dragon undocked from at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. Dragon is performing a relocation to the Zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station. You can see it there on the top of your screen. It's performing that relocation ahead of the launch of the Boeing Starliner crew. Starliner is slated to launch to the International Space Station on Monday evening. And as we continue to monitor today's port relocation, you are looking at a view inside Mission Control Houston.
On the big loop, midpoint has been reached.
And that call out that the midpoint has been reached. There will be a brief hold here before the crew continues to proceed towards the zenith port of the International Space Station. So again, you're looking at a view inside Mission Control Houston of the ICE officer on console, or the ISS systems engineer, Greg Anderson. He's one of two integrated positions with SpaceX alongside the VVO here in Mission Control Houston, or the visiting vehicle officer. They worked hand in hand this morning to troubleshoot and work through that issue that did delay undocking a bit, but everything proceeding as expected this morning at this point, and Dragon is continuing to make its way towards that zenith port of the International Space Station ahead of its redocking. And we are getting a very nice view here of Dragon as it continues its approach. And as you can see in this view on your screen now, Dragon is really starting to swing up and above the International Space Station as it approaches the docking port on the Harmony module on the zenith or space-facing side. Towards the back, you can see two circular arrays there. That is actually the Northrop Grumman Cygnus cargo vehicle that is currently docked to the International Space Station.
As Sandra mentioned, Dragon is swinging up to face the space-facing side of the Harmony module. It will remain approximately 60 meters away from the station throughout this entire process. And then once it is aligned with the docking axis, it can then begin to move towards the zenith port. And it'll move closer in about 20 meters and hold for alignment checks, checkouts of Dragon, checking for lighting conditions, and confirming that everybody will be ready for the final approach. So again, right now, Dragon is remaining about 60 meters away from the space station, and will begin to move closer to the station once it is aligned with the docking axis.
And that midpoint has been reached as Dragon continues to swing up above the International Space Station. The next major milestone that we'll look towards is when Dragon is aligned to the docking axis. That essentially means Dragon is pretty much right in line with where it is slated to dock. Again, this is a fully autonomous operation this morning. Dragon is utilizing its LiDAR system to align with the docking axis and make its way up and above the International Space Station and provide that guidance for it. And just looking ahead a little bit, following that midpoint being reached, we will see Dragon continue its transition maneuver to the zenith docking axis, then hold for that LiDAR confirmation as we just discussed when it's pretty much right in front of the docking axis, and then Dragon will continue to make its way towards waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is approximately 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Once everything checks out there for the team on the ground, Dragon will continue to resume docking and final approach for a soft capture first, and then eventually a hard capture. We are expecting redocking to occur around 8:41 a.m. Central. Dragon continuing to approach that docking axis. We are expecting that alignment to occur in just a couple of minutes from now. Dragon is currently 56 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close in. And this view of Dragon on your screen as it continues to make its approach. As you can see, the nose cone is open, will remain open throughout this entire operation. You can also see a little view of the docking hooks. If you look in the very center of that circle there's a couple of almost triangular looking objects. Those are the docking hooks that help to drive the Dragon towards the International Space Station. There are 12 hooks in all. They drive and undrive in sets of 6. So once Dragon does make soft capture with the International Space Station, those hooks will drive to create that hard latch between Dragon and the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control Houston, Flight Director on console during this shift, Paul Kanya, is now going to poll the team on if they are go for approaching to waypoint 2, which is again 20 meters away from the International Space Station. He's also going to poll the team on if they are ready for the actual docking procedure to occur as well.
As Sandra mentioned, the Dragon spacecraft is currently about 60 meters away, but when we do approach to waypoint 2, that is about 28 meters away from
Dragon
station.
On the big loop. Dragon has arrived at the second 60-meter hold point and is configured for docking. Please confirm your readiness for approach 1.
Ready for approach 1.
Copy that.
Just as we heard those comms, we did reach the second hold, that 60-meter hold. Waiting to approach waypoint 2. Again, that will be 20 meters away from station. And once we reach waypoint 2, then we can confirm final alignment, check out Dragon, check lighting conditions, make sure that the ground readiness, everyone is ready for final approach for docking today.
And Dragon is about 60 meters away from the space station. It is going to perform a hold at this point so the team can check everything out, make sure everything is looking good before Dragon does proceed to waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, once Dragon reaches that point, there will be another brief hold before Dragon gets the go to proceed and eventually dock to the International Space Station. We are targeting that docking at 8:41 a.m. Central Time this morning. And as Dragon continues that hold at the 60-meter mark, the teams here in Mission Control Houston are evaluating if Dragon is ready to proceed towards waypoint 2. And we are hearing a go from the team here in Mission Control that they are ready to proceed towards waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from the International Space Station. Here you are getting a view inside Mission Control Houston this morning, the team being led by NASA Flight Director Paul Kanya.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Ground is go for continued approach, and we will be commanding resume to approach waypoint 2.
Okay.
We just heard that confirmation that we are go for approaching waypoint 2. Again, that will be maneuvering from 60 meters away from the station.
Station
It's about
Houston,
20
on the
meters.
Big Loop. TC. Dragon is resuming approach to waypoint 2. Monitor per step 3 and 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
In step 3 of 1.102.
And again, Dragon did get the go from the team to proceed towards waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. Currently, Dragon is 54 meters away from the space station and continuing to close in.
And again, once they reach that 20-meter mark from station, they'll do some checkouts of Dragon, again, checking the lighting conditions, and again, confirming ground readiness for final approach for redocking to the International Space Station this morning. Again, expecting docking to occur approximately at 7:51 a.m. this morning. Excuse me, 7:41 a.m. Central Time this morning.
Dragon now less than 40 meters away from the space station, 35 meters and closing in. We will have a hold again at 20 meters away from the space station, targeting that docking at 8:41 a.m. Central Time, now less than 10 minutes away from now.
Just down on the Dragon.
Matt, was that visors down?
Affirmative. SpaceX visors are down for Dragon.
Copy, visors down. We are going to be holding here at waypoint 2 for a few minutes as we finish up configuration on the ISS side.
Dragon.
And with Dragon now at waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from the space station, they're going to complete another brief hold. You did hear the call out for the crew to ensure that their visors are down. They were able to put their visors up as they were making the translational move up and around, but now that they're approaching in for some of the more dynamic phases of this operation, they are going to put their visors down as a precautionary measure. And you are getting a view here of the team in Mission Control Houston. We did talk about the ICE officer, the ISS Systems Engineer Officer on console that is working very closely alongside SpaceX during these integrated operations. But there's also another console here in Mission Control Houston, our VVO or Visiting Vehicle Officer, Nick Fernald, who you see there kind of towards the center of your screen there. They've been working very closely alongside SpaceX throughout today's operation. So if you are just joining us, Dragon did undock from the International Space Station's forward port of the Harmony module at 7:57 a.m. Central Time this morning. Dragon then proceeded to have a couple of firings to undock from the space station and then has since been swinging up and around to redock to the zenith port of the International Space Station. Dragon is now 20 meters away from that zenith port and completing a hold for the team on the ground to ensure everything looks good before they give the go to proceed with that final docking to the zenith port. Today's port relocation is occurring ahead of the crewed flight test of the Boeing Starliner vehicle, which will carry NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams to the International Space Station for a week-long test flight of the Starliner vehicle. That launch is scheduled for Monday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. And continuing to stand by for that hold at waypoint 2, that 20-meter mark away from space station. This is the final alignment and checkout of Dragon. We also take a look at any lighting conditions and confirm that all teams on the ground are ready for a final approach.
And once we do get that go for approach, we will have a soft capture of Dragon to the International Space Station prior to the 12 hooks driving into the International Space Station for a hard capture, and then the umbilical reattaching to the space station at its new port.
Station Houston, Space Ground 2 for TC. Just check in on your review of steps 5 and 6 per step 3.
The review is complete.
Houston copies.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground has pulled go for docking, so please confirm your visors are still down and that you are ready for approach 2.
SpaceX Dragon ready for approach 2. Visors still down.
And great news there.
Copy all. Ground will be enabling resume shortly, and as a reminder, once you're inside the crew hands-off points, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Okay.
Great news there. We did hear confirmation that we are go for proceeding with docking this morning. We also heard them mention CHOP, which is crew hands off point. And that is where the crew will no longer be able to take over control of Dragon. The Dragon vehicle will be autonomous at that point.
That's right, Jesse, and that call for CHOP or crew hands-off point, as you mentioned, occurs about 2 meters before contact.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. TC, monitor per steps 5 and 6 of 1.102.
Go and work.
And you heard it there, everyone on the ground go for docking. NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who is on board the International Space Station, is going to continue to monitor the redocking of the Crew 8 Dragon Endeavour from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony. Dragon is now 16 meters away from the International Space Station. Dragon now less than 15 meters away from the International Space Station.
Again, as we're approaching docking, there will be a soft capture followed by hard capture of the 12 hooks on Dragon to the International Space Station, and then followed by the installation of the umbilical. And again, we should hear a call out for CHOP, that crew hands-off point, again, 2 meters away from docking. And again, that means any aborts that need to be initiated will need to happen by Dragon's flight computer after that point rather than from the crew.
Meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
Dragon is now less than 8 meters away. Expecting the call for CHOP, that crew hands-off period, here in just a couple meters at the 2-meter mark.
Five meters.
Copy, 5 meters.
Standing by for that CHOP, crew hands-off period call.
Meters.
Copy, 2 meters.
One meter.
Copy, 1 meter. Soft capture confirmed.
And great news, we heard confirmation of soft capture of the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station at 8:46 a.m. Central Time.
Again, that redocking occurred at 8:46 a.m. Central.
Ring retraction in progress.
Docking occurred over the eastern Indian Ocean northwest of Australia.
Second.
You did hear the call out about that soft capture ring being retracted. This will continue until sensors indicate those hooks are ready to drive and create the hard capture. So again, Dragon has soft captured to the zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station following a port relocation maneuver from the forward port of the Harmony module. Once that soft capture ring is put into the correct place and the final hooks have driven, we do confirm that there is a hard mate. That is an airtight seal around the crew vehicle and the International Space Station. And then after hard capture is complete, we will expect a couple more leak checks and the hatch to be opened about 2 hours later. So a recap of what we've seen thus far this morning: Dragon undocked from the forward port of the International Space Station at 7:57 a.m. Central Time while flying east off of the coast of the Bahamas. Dragon backed away to 60 meters, swung out and above the space station towards that zenith port, then moved to waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away from the International Space Station, before making its final approach for docking, which occurred at 8:46 a.m. Central Time this morning while Dragon was flying over the East Indian Ocean west of Australia.
We are still waiting for confirmation of hard capture. We did hear a call out that the soft capture ring was being retracted. Once that's fully retracted, then we can begin driving the 12 hard hooks for the hard capture. And they will be driven 6 hooks at a time. So there will be 6 hooks that drive in first. Once those complete, then the second set of 6 hooks can then also drive into the International Space Station and confirm that hard capture.
Ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Great news there. Just heard that the soft capture ring retraction is now complete.
And with the soft capture ring retracted successfully, the next milestone that we'll look towards is the first set of 6 hooks driving. Following that, we'll have the second set of hooks driving, and you are getting a view on your screen now of Dragon docked to the International Space Station. This is a view from Dragon's camera of the zenith port of the International Space Station. That circular
Dragon Station, Houston on the big loop. MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Copies.
2 copies.
And so that first set of hooks is now driving again. There's 12 in total. They drive in sets of 6. So the first 6 is beginning to complete that drive. Once all 12 are successfully driven, we will have what is called a hard capture. That circular object with the crosshair that you see in the middle of your screen there is the docking target. NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson affixed the docking target to the outside of the APAS hatch on the zenith port of the International Space Station earlier before closing it. Rather, it was already closed, but that creates that space between Dragon and station known as the vestibule. This portion will have to be repressurized before the crew inside Dragon does re-enter the International Space Station. Continuing to stand by as that first set of hooks drives. Everything going smoothly so far. And the first set of hooks is now closed, second set beginning to close.
Once that second set of hooks does close, the hard capture will be confirmed, and then the umbilical can then begin attached from Dragon to the International Space Station. As we saw, that the Dragon trunk is still attached to Dragon when it is not connected to the International Space Station. That is how Dragon gets power. But while it is docked and parked at the International Space Station, it can connect to the station's power and utilize power from there.
And once that second set is successfully driven, and after all docking events are completed, flight controllers will configure Dragon for docked operations and will reconnect power and data to the spacecraft to the crew currently inside Dragon. Again, that is NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, Jeanette Epps, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin. Soon they will be able to get out of those spacesuits that they've been wearing for the entirety of today's port relocation, and will begin the operations to get the hatches back open. This will include pressurizing that vestibule and a new round of leak checks. Now 10 minutes since Dragon made its new home on the International Space Station at International Docking Adapter 3, or the Zenith port on the Harmony module.
SpaceX on the big loop. Hard capture is complete.
6-7 copy. Hard capture complete. Open advisors.
And we did hear confirmation that that second set of hooks has successfully driven, giving us what we call a hard capture. and Crew 8 again has successfully docked to the Zenith port, or the space-facing port of the International Space Station. Crew 8 will now be able to get out of their spacesuits and begin the process of opening up the hatches. In all, this will take about 2 hours. But with a successful port relocation this morning, we're going to wrap up our coverage of Dragon's relocation from the forward port of Harmony to the Zenith port of Harmony in preparation for the historic crewed test flight of the Boeing Starliner vehicle with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams aboard. You can watch live launch coverage beginning at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Monday, May 6th, ahead of launch at 10:34 p.m. Eastern. We do hope you'll join us then, but for now, this is Mission Control Houston.